Somewhere in the ruins of the world, the dead walk and the living barely hold on. Cities have crumbled, roads are silent, and the few souls still breathing have learned one brutal truth. Survival is never about strength alone. It is about what you are willing to lose, who you choose to trust, and how far you will go, before the darkness inside you becomes just as dangerous as the monsters outside. These are for stories from that broken world, for lives twisted by fear, loss, and desperate hope. And if you think you know how they end, you don't. Joey had built himself a small, quiet life inside the earth, underground, sealed from everything the world had become. He existed rather than lived. His days were measured by the flicker of an old television screen replaying baseball games from a time when crowds still cheered, and by the warm weight of his dog pressing against his leg. That dog was his heartbeat, the only breathing thing left in his world that asked for nothing but a walk and a little love. Every time they stepped outside, Joey was ready, vest on, knife at his side, eyes scanning every shadow, like a soldier who never got to go home. One night, the dog needed to go out, and Joey stepped into the cold darkness with him. He made a quiet joke, something about dead relatives and bathroom urgency, but the laughter died the moment he saw them coming, shapes in the dark, too many. He pulled the lever and the fence screamed upward from the ground, but a handful of them slipped through before it locked. Joey moved fast, driving his knife through them one by one, with the kind of practiced calm that only comes from too many nights like this. He survived, but his dog didn't. He buried him in the dirt outside the bunker, patting the earth down gently, and then sat in the silence below, completely alone for the first time in what felt like forever. The emptiness that followed was worse than any zombie. Joey sat with his old printouts, paper messages from a woman named Sandra, someone he had fallen in love with through a screen before the world collapsed. They had never met in person, just words on a page. And yet those words felt like the most real thing he had left. He read them slowly, then folded them carefully, then made a decision. He was going to find her. Staying underground any longer wouldn't save him. It would hollow him out completely. He loaded everything he could carry, climbed into his car, and drove toward the only direction that meant anything anymore. He made good progress until the road bit back, the tires shredded on hidden spikes, and Joey barely had time to step out of the car before a zombie lunged from the roadside. Then, from nowhere, a blade, a flash of movement, and the creature dropped. The woman who saved him didn't smile. She was lean, sharp-eyed, and already pointing a weapon at him. Her name was Abby, and she had been waiting beside those spikes for 6 months, hunting exactly this kind of opportunity. She wanted his car. She wanted nothing else from him. And she made that perfectly clear. But the car wouldn't cooperate. Joey, seeing his only leverage, told her there were special settings required to make it start. And she believed him just long enough to fail. With no other choice, Abby agreed to bring him along. Though she cuffed his wrists and kept her gun close, the road was long and uncomfortable. Abby talked without pause about everything, about nothing, filling every mile with noise that made Joey quietly reach for his earphones and disappear into silence. That night, camped in the open, while Joey slept, Abby opened his diary. What she read made her lower her weapon the next morning. When zombies found their camp in the dark house, Joey and Abby fought back to back without a word of coordination, moving together like they had done it 100 times. When the last one fell, she reached over and unlocked the cuffs. Something shifted between them. Not softness exactly, but recognition. Two people still breathing in a world full of reasons not to be. They continued on, sharing stories at a warehouse stop, and discovered their destination sat side by side on the map. She would drop him at Sandra's first. That was the plan, until the next morning, when someone else made a plan of their own. The car was gone. The keys had been left inside and someone had taken their chance. Joey exploded with blame and Abby fired it right back, until Joey's voice dropped. He told her the truth. There were no special settings. Any key would have started it. He had lied to keep control, and the fuel line she had forgotten to switch on had done the rest accidentally. Abby stared at him with the kind of fury that only comes from trusting someone you didn't want to trust. She turned and pointed to directions, one for him, one for her, and walked away. But somehow, in a world without roads or maps or promises, the two of them had already left marks. Marks on each other that wouldn't fade. Abby reached her ex-husband's house and found it full of paintings. One of them was her face, rendered with care and love onto canvas. Her chest ached with something she couldn't name. But he wasn't there. The house was full of him and empty of him at the same time. Meanwhile, Joey reached Sandra's bunker with zombies on his heels. He shouted at the camera, and the door opened just in time. Sandra pulled him inside, and they held each other in the dark hallway for 100 days of silence, and suddenly, another human being. She gave him cake, and Joey laughed at the strangeness of it. And then everything went black. He woke up tied to a chair. The warmth he had seen in Sandra's eyes was gone. In its place was something cracked and hollow, the remnant of a woman who had been alone so long. She had crossed a line she couldn't find her way back from. She moved toward him with a knife when Abby's voice crackled through the CCTV speaker outside. Sandra pivoted, hid Joey, and opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She gave Abby the same cake, but Abby had eaten worse things and survived. And she tasted the wrongness immediately. When Sandra lunged, she found something she hadn't expected, someone who hid back. Abby fought her off, found Joey, and cut him free in seconds. Sandra came at them both, and Joey made the only choice the moment allowed. The knife left his hand and found its mark. Sandra crumpled, and then rose again. Eyes dead, mouth open, reaching, they ran. They locked her inside the bunker she had turned into a prison and walked out into the open air. Joey asked about the ex-husband. Abby shook her head slowly. She thought he was gone. They stood there for a moment, two people who had lied to each other, fought each other, and still ended up standing side by side. Then they started walking. Joey, Abby, and a goat that had no idea how strange its companions were. The second story belongs to a woman who believed the world existed to serve her ambitions. Claire ran her insurance office like a machine, and her employees were just parts she could burn through and replace. She drove them without mercy, docked their pay without guilt, and wore authority like armor. The one person she could never break was Gina, a woman who looked at Claire with no fear at all, and simply refused. When the zombie virus began bleeding into the edges of the city, Claire saw numbers, not catastrophe. She ordered more sales calls, more overtime. While her staff picked up phones, she quietly packed a bag and headed for the door. Claire and her husband joined the slow panic at a gas station, a fuel tanker still hours away. That's where she found Gina again, already moving, scanning for a way out. Claire fired her on the spot out of pure reflex. Gina accepted it without blinking and walked away. But then a car rolled past with something wrong in the back seat. Reality arrived for Gina. She needed fuel. She needed to move. When the tank arrived, She pulled a gun. That one decision detonated everything. The officer, the driver, the struggle, the bullet. The tank, a wall of fire swallowed them all, and then everything went white. Claire blinked and she was back in the office. Mouth dry, heart slamming, the smell of smoke still ghosting. Gina stood across the room, looking equally wrong. They understood something impossible. They had died and come back, sealed inside a loop they hadn't built and couldn't escape alone. Claire tried to stop it by warning people. She tried to outsmart it, to redirect it, to hand Gina to the police. The truck exploded every time. The office reset every time. The pain of dying never faded. It accumulated, and it began to change them both. Finally, exhausted past the point of strategy, they sat down together and stopped fighting. Claire asked why Gina needed the truck so badly. Gina answered quietly, her sister's children, another city, and a desperate need to reach them before it was too late. The answer landed deep inside Claire and rearranged something. She looked back at everything she had done. The money she had chased, the people she had crushed. She felt the full weight of it clearly. She sent her stuff home. She left her husband. She sat with Gina and built a plan, not out of control or cruelty, but out of something that felt uncomfortably like care. They distracted the police together, hijacked the tanker together, drove it toward the city's edge. When they crossed a bridge clogged with zombies tearing into survivors, they didn't look away. They flooded the road with fuel and turned the monsters into fire. The celebration lasted as long as it needed to before flames crept back toward the tank. The explosion threw them both far and hard. But this time, they opened their eyes. For the first time, they saw the same sky above them. The loop was gone. The pain was real. The change was real. They lay there laughing in the ash, then stood up and walked forward together. The third story lives on water. On a large ship anchored on a lake in the northern wilderness, 30 wealthy families decided the dead couldn't swim, and they were right. The lake became their fortress. Among those families was a woman named Dee, who moved through the ship like a storm front. She didn't smile. She didn't socialize. She watched. The ship's caretaker, Brooke, was everything Dee wasn't. Gentle and easy to love. Dee's own daughter, Lydia, had begun reaching toward Brooke like flowers toward sunlight. Dee felt it like a wound she didn't know how to close. Dee forced herself to attend a social gathering, but sat apart, quiet and rigid. When the bartender, Billy, tried to lighten the mood, she left without a word. Later that night, she spotted people on the shore, not zombies, but humans, and felt the alarm rise in her chest without quite knowing why. When a passenger disappeared the next morning and fear rippled through the ship, Dee named Billy and watched no one believe her. Lydia told her mother plainly that she wanted to live with Brooke instead. Dee found a corner of the ship and let the grief she never showed anyone out in silence. It was from that same corner that she saw Billy, mirror in hand. Flashing coded signals to the shore, she confronted him, and he dove into the water. When Lydia witnessed her mother's intensity and assumed she had lost her mind, she locked her door. But Dee had been right all along. Billy returned with men who boarded the ship with weapons. And the passenger they had all been searching for had already been killed to keep the secret. Dee moved through those men like something that had been waiting for this. She killed them and gathered Lydia and got them both onto a lifeboat before the ship could take them under with it. On the shore, surrounded by the dead on all sides, Dee made the most terrible and necessary calculation of her life. She pulled Lydia down into a pile of bodies, smeared them both with the blood of things no longer living, and held her daughter completely still in the dark, when the zombies passed. They found Brooke waiting near the water. Dee raised her gun. Lydia stepped between them. Dee lowered it, not because she forgave Brooke, but because her daughter's voice carried a weight she couldn't argue with. She told Brooke the truth instead, quietly and without decoration, and walked away. Weeks passed. A truck, some food, a fretful quiet. Then Lydia cried during a zombie attack and hid while Dee fought alone. Dee stood in the aftermath feeling something worse than fear. She looked at her daughter and thought about what the future held. And for a moment she considered the unthinkable. Then the jungle moved. A tribe emerged from the undergrowth wearing the skins of the dead to walk among them. A brutal and brilliant camouflage. Their leader ordered Dee and Lydia killed. Dee answered that order with violence so overwhelming that the tribe went silent. The leader fell. Dee knelt beside him, took what she needed, and stood. The tribe looked at her and bowed their heads. She had found her people, or perhaps she had always been their kind. The fourth story is quieter and stranger and somehow the most disturbing of all. Deep inside a jungle, inside a laboratory humming with screens and data, the scientist had chosen the dead over the living. He studied zombies with the detached devotion of a man who had replaced love with observation. He named them. He categorized them. He watched them through drones and built theories about evolution and natural order that helped him avoid the simpler truth that he was terrified of other people and zombies were easier to understand. His closest friend from before had turned, and instead of grieving him, the scientist had fitted him with a tracking collar and named him Object 21. When a girl came crashing through the jungle in full flight, the scientist watched her on his screen with scientific curiosity rather than human concern. He wanted to observe her. When Object 21 moved toward Anna and she fought back, his worry was only for his research subject, not for her. He went outside to protect his data, not a person. He brought Anna back to his lab reluctantly. She was sick and sharp-tongued, and she told him bluntly that if he left her outside to die, she would come back for him forever. He let her in. He gave her medicine. He kept his distance and called it professionalism. They talked across a widening gap of worldview. He believed the zombie migration was nature correcting itself. She believed surviving was the only point. One afternoon, through the drone feed, they watched a group of people being torn apart. Anna begged him to help them. He held her arm and explained the food chain in calm, measured language while people died on the screen. She looked at him for a long moment and saw exactly what he was. Not a villain, something lonelier and more broken than that. A man who had decided that caring was a variable he could simply remove from the equation. When Object 21 fell into a flooded river and the current began taking him away, the scientist forgot every theory he had ever held and ran. He threw a rope in and pulled and screamed his friend's name. Not the number, the name, the real one buried under years of clinical distance. A crocodile rose from the water and the rope became a death sentence. Anna arrived and cut it. The scientist fell back safe. Object 21 disappeared downstream. The scientist turned on Anna with a fury that was really grief wearing its old mask. She told him the dead were migrating in a massive wave and the jungle was about to be swallowed. He refused to listen. She left. A few days later, the scientist walked through his jungle wearing a dead skin for camouflage, moving among his subjects like he had always secretly wanted to. He found a new zombie and crouched down to fit a collar round her neck. He recognized the face. He recognized the way she had looked at him when she was alive, challenging him to be better than he was. He didn't feel sorrow. He opened his notebook, wrote a new name, and looked up at her with professional satisfaction in the end. The man who had dedicated his life to understanding the monsters had become the only truly cold. Being in a world full of them, he watched her shuffle away into the dark and wondered, with quiet academic interest, where she would go next.